So the first thing is that work isn't where you're going to be making all your friends. When you first get a software job as an entry-level developer, you might expect your first job to be kind of similar to how it was in college and everything, where you make friends at work, you hang out at work, you hang out after work, you go out drinking with them, everything like that. But the reality is that you might not become close friends with your coworkers, and that's completely okay. But spending time with your coworkers still has a lot of value, even if they don't turn into these deep, long-lasting friendships. For one, they could become very excellent and powerful connections for your network in the future. But besides that, there's this incredible value that can be added to your life in the form of weak ties. It's summed up best in this article, but basically our lives are filled with all these really small but meaningful interactions that mean a lot to us in the long run. Think of like the barista at the coffee shop that remembers your coffee order, or like the gym receptionist that remembers your name when you sign in. And the same thing applies to those quick, casual chats we have with our coworkers when we just run into them in the hallway or something. And those interactions, even though they seem really small, they add substantial value to our lives. You don't need to become close friends with your coworkers. They probably have different priorities and different things they want in life and out of their job, but it doesn't mean you can't. I myself was pretty close to my coworkers in my first job out of college. But in the end, if your job becomes a place where you can make friends, that's a huge bonus. But just remember, it's not a requirement for having a fulfilling work life. So min-maxing your career based solely on prestige does very little for your overall happiness. So this was a realization I had in my second job. I had a senior engineer who I felt like he didn't like me. And whether it was true or not, the way he talked to me was very condescending and I just didn't like it. And because of this, I set my sights on joining a big company. And my goal was to prove this senior developer and all my other coworkers and everyone else in my life that I was smarter than they thought I was. And eventually, I was able to leave that company and join a much bigger one, which was a huge milestone for my career. But it didn't make me or my life that much happier. Yeah, I made more money and I proved something to myself, but was that really worth it? Would that be really worth it for you? Only you can really decide for yourself. It was a good motivational factor for me, and I'm glad I went through the experience and learned all these things. But focusing on improving your career solely for external validation, that's a trap. Jealousy of other people is a waste of time. So in the early stages of a software career, it can be pretty easy to idolize certain people. So you might look at someone who's working at like Google or something and think like, wow, you must be so smart. But then on the flip side, maybe you'll have like a coworker or like an old classmate or just some sort of peer that gets a job at Google. And now suddenly you think, him? He got a job at Google? Like if he could do it, I could do it. That was basically how I felt back in school and even early on in my career. And it's just a huge trap and just such a limiting mindset. The mindset of how did they do that when I couldn't? And it might seem like this will motivate you or drive you to work harder or faster or just put more effort into your own career. But the times in my life where I was the most envious of other people, those were the times I was actually the most lost in my career. Those were the times that I had the least to show for. I hadn't put in the time, the effort, the work that these people put in. I wasn't even close to getting into any of those companies, let alone have any good software fundamentals. The truth is that anyone can be good or great at anything they want, anything they put their mind to, but they have to put their mind to it first. And I had not yet. The crucial question for me and for anyone else who thinks like this is, why should it matter so much what other people are doing with their lives? Why should it matter to you what other people are achieving? Focus on your own path and your achievements and your accomplishments. And don't be devoting mental energy to thinking about what other people are doing all the time. That's what I would tell myself. Look out for your own best interests and don't expect other people to look out for yours. So if you're at the beginning of your software career or you just recently secured a software job, there can be an overwhelming pressure to say yes to anything anyone asks for. And that can be suffocating for you and your mental health. You might find yourself agreeing to like stay really late or agree to take on more tasks on the weekend to be done. It's important to be aware of this because some people and some companies will have no qualms with exerting you to your max and just exploiting your eagerness to work. And some companies might even have like these team meetings where everyone gets together and the boss tells everyone that they need to hunker down or like burn the midnight oil or something. So while it's important to learn a lot at a new job and not underperform, it's equally important to to prioritize your own mental health, take your necessary breaks, and to set your own boundaries. Because honestly, no one else will do this for you. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are bosses or coworkers or people that will tell you when you're doing too much. That's how you know those are the people you want to keep around. Your well-being should always be a priority, and saying no is a key part to growing in your career. Comparing yourself to your coworkers or worrying about how fast they work is a surefire way to misery. It's a common trap to look at someone in your career who's maybe like the same age and think like, wow, they are so far ahead of me. I speak from experience because I am guilty of doing this so many times in my career, and I still even do this to this day. This sort of thinking just really leads to increased day-to-day stress and anxiety. Another trap is, when you see your coworkers working a ton, working on the weekends, putting in all these hours, completing all these tasks left and right, and then feeling pressured to do the same. In the past, I've also used other people's work ethics as a benchmark for my own output. But again, if this is something that you don't want to do, it will only lead to unhappiness. The key is to understand that everyone has their own pace and style of working. And while some people might thrive with these long hours and high visibility projects, others just might enjoy a balanced work and home life. And just because you're not working as much as them doesn't mean you're on the chopping block or you're about to get fired or something. Remember that your career is a marathon and not a sprint. Don't feel under pressure to always be doing something. So the reality is that software engineers aren't coding for every single moment of the entire workday. And if you keep telling yourself that you need to do more, you need to be more productive, you're not doing enough, you're gonna get fired, you're gonna get really tired really fast. This is something that I grapple with, and just realizing that software engineers don't code and program 24/7. In an 8-hour workday, people are spending their time on all kinds of things like meetings, responding to emails, responding to Slack messages, looking at bugs, triaging, researching, and yes, like even scrolling Reddit way too long and taking slightly long lunch breaks and just procrastinating. All of that is pretty normal. And I used to psych myself out thinking that if I didn't respond to Slack messages in like 5 minutes, that I was gonna get fired. This anxiety was probably just the residual stress from the pain of searching for my first software job. But remember, it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to work at your own pace and not have to constantly be worried about getting fired and stuff. Understand that the grass is always greener on the other side. So when I was unemployed, all I wanted was a job. When I had a job at a small startup, all I wanted to do was work with more people. When I worked at a slightly larger startup, all I wanted to do was work at a big company. When I worked at a big company, all I wanted was to go back to the learning and pace of a startup. And when I went back to a startup, I got tired of the fast-paced environment. The grass is always greener on the other side. And there can be a sense in your career, especially early on, to always be looking towards other places and being like, that. If I just had that one thing, I would be happy. But the truth is that's probably not all you need, and it's not gonna make you that much happier. And obviously this shouldn't deter you from exploring new opportunities or experimenting with your career, but it should be a reminder for you to value your own situation while you're in it, enjoy it while you're in it, and remember it when you do one day move on. Don't worry about things that haven't been explicitly said to you. So this applies to various situations, but a pretty common example is when you're like requesting time off from work or something, and then you're reading too far into the minute details of your boss's facial expressions. You shouldn't hold back from taking time off because you're afraid of disappointing your bosses or your colleagues or whatever. And this really applies to anything. Like, don't read too much into the small nonverbal cues of your coworkers and put all this unnecessary stress on yourself. This is something I've learned recently is called rejection sensitivity, and it is a psychological phenomenon that is different based on your upbringing and the people you hung out with growing up and just how you are as a person. And this was just something I realized I did far too often. Like, I read too far into people's tones, people's facial expressions, just how they sent Slack messages and stuff, and it caused me so much unnecessary stress, and it caused me to see all these ghosts in my career. And again, I thought I was just gonna be fired all the time in my first job. Save yourself the stress. Don't read too much into people's cues. Wait for them to tell you straight up, because that's what your bosses and other people in the company are for. So if you like this video, you might want to check out this other video I made about software job search traps that might be wasting your time. Thanks for watching.